And I believe we are now live. Hello, word nerds. Welcome to our live chat. It is March the 1st, 2020, approaching the end of the first quarter of 2020.
Oh, dear.
So I was kind of spreading that out a little bit because I could see on the YouTube that it was taking us a minute to actually show up as live. So we're so glad you're here. Tonight we are going to be talking all about being a good critique partner / beta reader. You've got me, Megan, Emma, and Rachel today, and hopefully Desiree will be joining us soon. She got stuck in traffic because traffic is the worst, and I'm really hyped to be here today, as you can all tell.
So we have an honorary fourth member.
Yes.
Which is a cat.
Yes, the harshest critiquer of the four of us.
Yes,
by far.
She's just sitting here critiquing me.
Yeah.
If you hear any cat yelling in the background, she's been just yelling at me all day. So had to explain that weird yell that you might hear eventually at some point during this chat.
It's not someone being tortured. It's just the cat.
Oh, we already got a meow. Oh, honey.
This is great timing because Kelly and I both did Write On Con last weekend, and one of the topics was critiquing. So very well prepared today. A few terms you're going to hear us mentioning: critique partners, which is kind of the umbrella term for anyone who you're sharing your work with, or that's how it's going to be used in this case. You might have your own definitions, and that is fine. Semantics are weird. Linguistics is always changing, especially for something where it's not set in stone. We're just going to use critique partners as the umbrella for someone you switch work with. You might hear alpha readers, which is maybe someone who you share chapter by chapter work with or go through your brainstorming with. Someone who sees very early parts of your drafts. And then when we talk about beta reading, we're talking about someone who is reading your full manuscript for you, or you are reading a full manuscript for them. And so I figured we would open up with talking about what your personal favorite things are to critique, whether it's the brainstorming chapter by chapter or full books. Emma.
Oh my gosh. You prepared us for this and I'm still not prepared.
Oh no!
I definitely like doing full book, just because I think it's really valuable to be able to give notes on the book as a whole, in addition to smaller chapter and scene-based things. I think I froze. Did I freeze?
I love your mug.
Okay, you both froze, and so I thought I froze.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like being able to kind of give little notes along the way, but also at the end be kind of big picture, this is what works or doesn't work about the book.
I like going chapter by chapter, mostly because that's the most, that is, wow, words. Okay, that is, I've mostly worked with that when I beta read. So I like going chapter by chapter because it kind of goes in between giant picture things and smaller things like line edits. So you kind of, to me, at least it's the best of both worlds. Or if I'm going chapter by chapter, I can say, well, in your last chapter, you mentioned this. Is this still a thing? Or, oh, in this chapter, you mentioned that this is like this instead. Was that, an original draft? Or, oh, hey, a couple chapters ago, you were mentioning this thing. Was that actually a plot device or that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, for sure. I'm all over the place. I really like helping in the development of ideas. I know that's something Kelly is also very into. She couldn't make it tonight, but she's really, really good at helping people develop their ideas. I really like reading my friends' early drafts. It's like they've revised it once. And I swear I'm not saying this to be coming at you, Emma, because I also want your book here working on finishing up revisions on, but I really do like that part of it, helping where it's there's so much that you can do with it. Sometimes when I get my friends 17th drafts, it's this is good. I hope that's what you wanted me to say.
reading
So, yeah.
Erin's drafts. You're like,
See, I read like the second draft of Witches of Ash and Ruin, and I liked that because I knew one more draft and I wouldn't be able to give any feedback. If you are wondering who Erin is, she's another one of the word nerds. Her book, Witches of Ash and Ruin, is coming out in 2 days.
Right here.
Yes, Witches of Ash and Ruin by E. Latimer. It's amazing. You should definitely go buy it. She hasn't been here to the Sunday Chats for a while because she's been doing so much promo. There's been like some complications with it. And so if you haven't pre-ordered it already, please do that. Ebooks are available for pre-order as well. If you pre-ordered an ebook before, in the last week or so with the publishing house switch, there was a problem and all of the ebooks that got pre-ordered got canceled. So please check if you pre-ordered the ebook that it is still ordered to your account, because we love Erin and we want her book to do well.
Yes.
Buy all the books. Yeah, definitely let us know in the discussion section as well what your favorite thing to critique is of your friends, of your writing pals. A question we get a lot here is, where do you find beta readers? And so, yeah, let's kick off. We've already kicked off. Oh, wow. What a night. But yeah, I was thinking maybe we could dive into some, like, where can you actually meet beta readers? Where have you guys met your beta readers, i.e. the word nerds?
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's like a lot of like Twitter writing events and stuff, like CP Match and things like that, and just like kind of like writing community stuff and stuff. Like hashtag writing community, I think is one of them. There's a lot of like hashtags or like weekly like little like Twitter chats and stuff where a lot of people are finding others, other writers.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of CP Match, Right On Con has a function of their website called CP Match that I'm pretty sure is still totally functional, even though the conference is over, and you can use the CP Match function for free. You fill out like a dating profile of your book, and you can look around and match up with other people who write things that you might be interested in reading and see if you guys would be a good fit for each other. I'm on there. Be my writing friend, please.
You can also try things like Facebook groups, which is, I mean, it's always a adventure when there's multiple people along different points of the writing journey, and so sometimes people who aren't traditional writers who just like started writing might have a different way of interpreting your book than you would, or than another like person who's in the writing industry would. But it, just the act of like getting out there and asking, even on things like Wattpad. Like I found a couple of beta readers on Wattpad because we were just people that commented on each other's work, and then eventually it was like, hey, I'm writing this new thing. Do you want to like have a look at it? And they're like, yeah, okay. And some people were like, it is good. And some people were like, oh, I think it could be changed with this. So just like just asking is a good start.
Yeah. I always feel like trying to find beta readers is this weird dance of, I want you to be my friend, but I want us to have a good like working professional relationship. And that can make it seem really intimidating, kind of reaching out to people and being like, hey, be my friend, but also please give me really good feedback. I'm going to try really hard to give you really good feedback.
Well, that's also the problem where people think that criticism is bad, and it's like, no, like there's a whole range of criticism. But some people like don't want to offend you by saying that like, oh, this could be changed. They're just like, oh, it's fine. And it's like, no, like I'm still gonna like you if you tell me that I need to change this thing. That's what I'm using you for.
It's also like a matter of finding people who are kind of like in the same place as you, like in their like writing. Because like if you're like trying to critique somebody who's like much further along their journey and like a more developed writer, it can be really hard because you're like, this just sounds amazing to me because it sounds nothing like what I'm writing. And so it's hard to give critique when you're just like overwhelmed by like feeling like you're not good enough, so like it can be really important to find people who like their writing is at like a really similar level to yours.
For sure, yeah. If you're a student, you can also look in your school to see if there are other writers. I'm sure there are. That's how I met Kyra, a recurring guest word nerd, who I now we write books together. We liked each other's critique style so much that we were like, why don't we just write some books together too? And I met her because we were in a Kidlit publishing seminar together at university, and she and this other girl were talking about maybe getting a group together. And so they just wrote on the board, like, do you want to be in a writing group? Meet after class, stick around. And that was how we started that writing group. And it was really consistent and very useful. I'm definitely a big fan of in-person writing groups when it's possible.
Sorry, my cat's trying to eat my headphones. That's I was gonna say along the same lines of like school stuff. I work at a university and I also go to a university, so I have plenty of experience there. Yeah, if you want to just even, I think you have to register clubs at certain universities, depending on how legit you want to be, or you can just put up flyers. And even if I'm assuming a lot of writers are like English majors or people that are in the like literature field, you can ask your advisors or you can ask your counselors if you can put something up on the bulletin boards, or if they can send out emails, because as someone part of the English department, I get emails when I think a couple of weeks ago someone was wanting to start a poetry club, and so they just asked the advisor, and the advisor just put like this big email blast out to all the undergraduate students to be like, if you want to join this club, show up at this room, and this person is trying to start a thing. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And for getting published, my university has a literary magazine that I'm an associate editor on. And for that one, the way that we got submissions was we just put up a big sign that says, "Do you want to get your work published? Here is our magazine. Submit by this date." And then we got like a ton of people. So even just having that like visual poster somewhere is very helpful.
For sure. We've got some really great comments and discussion going on. Let us know your thoughts or any questions you might have about beta reading. We would love to talk about them. And Griswold said, I like reading the draft right before the final draft when the writer has specific things they want you to look for. That is very cool.
I definitely recommend, like, if you, at any draft, if you like have something specific that you are like struggling with or trying to figure out, like, let your beta readers know, you know, if there's like something you like really want help with.
For sure. Yeah. That kind of goes into the next topic that I was hoping to move into, which is setting ground rules and expectations for creating a critique partner relationship with someone. What are some of the things that you guys look for personally when you're looking for critique partners at this point? Like, what things are you like, we have to make sure that you get this before we start working together?
I think definitely just like a basic knowledge and appreciation for like the type of book you're writing. I know we've mentioned this before in like previous chats and videos, but like if you're writing like a middle grade fantasy story, like you don't really want a critique partner who only writes literary adult fiction and like doesn't read middle grade fantasy at all, because like while they may have some good feedback just like with writing in general, like story wise and trope wise, they're not gonna know enough to really help you out with it.
Yeah, or like be enthusiastic as you are.
Yeah, for sure. I like to always, if it's someone I've never read for before, ask if we can swap 3 chapters before swapping anything else, because then we can actually get a feel for if we're going to like each other's writing style and the story that's being presented, because sometimes you're not going to love everyone's writing style. And it's okay to say, like, I would love to be your writing friend, but I'm not the best fit for your work. And I'm fine with it if people tell me that too.
Yeah, just like, you know, you can read like a summary of a book and be like, oh man, this book sounds like something I'll love, and you read it and you don't actually love it. Like, just because someone's pitch sounds really great doesn't mean that it's going to be the right kind of book for you to be reading and critiquing.
Mhm. I found a lot of the time that, like, especially I used to do this a lot too, and it's kind of like have to, let it go. When people will kind of hear a good pitch that they really like, they'll kind of, if they don't like your writing, they'll be like, well, you should write it like this. And it's like, no, that's you writing it. So like whenever, for example, I for this literary magazine, I do a lot of poetry editing, and as someone who is in like metrics and prosody, I'm more in like classic literature where everything has like a syllabic format, or it's accentual, or it has a meter, or it has like very specific rules. Freeform poetry to me is often just feels kind of disjointed because I'm like, there's no pattern, there's no like repetition, there's no like form to it. It's just kind of like words. And so I've had to be like, this is not my work, but I see what you're trying to go for. Maybe, try this word choice instead, or maybe shorten your sentence here because it isn't broken up properly, or that kind of thing. So you have to kind of like figure out what you're critiquing, and not necessarily like you wanting to write the book for the other person, or you wanting to like fix the work for them when like, no, that's not the way that they intended it to be.
Yeah, that reminds me of a tweet that I saw, and I'm so sorry I don't remember who said it, but they were talking about one of the more difficult things to figure out when you're giving critique is, are you asking a question or saying something needs to be changed with regards to just every question you have? Do those things actually need to be changed based on the questions you have, or are they just questions that the text raised? Because there is a difference between, I have a question about this that I don't think the answer is going to ever make sense, and I have a question about this, I'm very excited to see more.
And I think it can be really useful as you go to like document any and all questions you have, because like sometimes, like it may be like handled really well and you get to the end of the book and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And it may be something that you thought was going to be addressed and never was. So I always like make note of like any questions I have while reading the draft, and then see like how I feel about the way it was or wasn't addressed.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Let me just double check the comments here. Welcome to everyone who's here. And yeah, so a couple of other things that I feel are important to address before you get into a critique partnership with someone are specifically knowing what kind of critique they're looking for. I think it's good to talk about everything. Like, do you need a lot of praise in your critiques? Do you just want it really direct? Are you going to be really direct when giving me critiques? Are you not going to praise me at all? Because for me, I need you to say at least a couple times that I'm on the right track. I don't need it a lot, but I need it 3 times throughout the manuscript. And just all of those different random things that you might not be expecting.
And like, are you the kind of person where you just want them to point out if something doesn't work, or do you want them to like offer ideas? Because like some people may like have an idea of how you could make something work. Do you want that or not? Because some people want it and some people don't.
Or do you just want to know this doesn't work?
Yeah.
Sorry, the camera's getting real shaky because the cat is just like all up in my business and trying to rub her face on everything.
So yeah, definitely all of that. We had a question from Jada. Do you guys know each other's work almost too well to be able to critique like a new reader?
I don't think so. I think you can get to know a specific book too well, which is why it can be useful to like get some new beta readers along the way if you've had like the same people reading multiple drafts. But every book is different. So just like you can, read 12 books by the same author and still have like thoughts and feelings about them all as separate books, you can as a critique partner too.
Yeah.
And I think the more you read for somebody, the more you kind of like know what to look out for. Like, like kind of what their weaknesses are.
Yeah. Ouch. It hurts. No, I definitely agree with that. With one caveat, I do have a writing group that I meet with online once a week. And sometimes I will bring them things that I've workshopped, like the brainstorming part of. So they've seen the plot. They've helped me develop some of the things that I would hope are going to be plot twists. And in that case, I try to avoid, or not avoid, I'll still give my book to them, but I try to also make sure that I'm giving it to at least one other person who doesn't know what the twists are going to be, or what my overall character arc goal is. Although if they know me well, they'll probably have a guess of what the character arc is.
I feel like it's good to have a combination of people who like know what your intention was with the book and people who don't know what your intention was.
Mm-hmm. This goes really well for query letters too. I try to get even more people to critique my query letter than I had critique my book, because it's a lower time commitment. And I always try to do half people who beta read the book and know the plot, and then half people who have no clue what the plot is at all. Let's see here. And like last week, there's 3 of us, so there's a chance that we'll end a little early. Apologies, the springtime is just a little hectic.
Last week I had to write a midterm, so like
it's that time of year.
They're like, here's your take-home midterm. We're opening it at 9:30 on Friday night, and it's due 9:30 on Monday night. I'm like, cool. I only have 1 day to do that, so I was like, Sunday. I'm sorry.
School,
man.
We've all been there. I mean, you two are both still there. I've been there. So yeah, you have, say, or how does your critique change if you're reading just a small piece of a work, say a chapter, versus if you're reading a big piece of work, a full book? Or does it change?
I think it definitely does. It's kind of like I said at the beginning, there's a lot more big picture stuff to be looking at if you're reading an entire book. Where I feel like if I'm just reading a couple chapters or 1 chapter or something, it's going to be more just looking at like, does what's happening in this chapter make sense? Are there like inconsistencies? Like I feel like it's going to be kind of like smaller level stuff if I only have 1 chapter to look at. Versus if I have like an entire book.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel like chapter by chapter works better earlier in the writing and revising process. Where like once you've written or you've revised it more times, it's better to just give people the whole book.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I when I first started trying to write more seriously, I would do my writing group. We were all very, very new writers. And so we would do chapter by chapter, kind of on an extended basis. And that I felt it wasn't necessarily great for, I'm making my book a lot better, but it was really good for figuring out things to look out for and things that I could improve in my writing before I had the entire book under my belt. And I definitely needed that book under my belt so that I could write like 5 more bad books and then start writing good books. But having a group who was at the same level as me, who were really encouraging, and we were kind of all figuring it out together, I really enjoyed that. So if that is your style, that's great. Whatever is working for you is a good thing. Speaking of the writing group, we had another question from Jada. How do you run an online writers group? Do you send your work in advance? So we run our online writers group the same as we ran it when it was in person, because Kyra and we were in this in-person writing group at our university, and then we kind of all split ways, and I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought because Emma dropped a link for me to put, which is very helpful. I was like, when did we do that? But yeah, so we started the group. It was in person. We had a Google Drive, and there's a folder in that Google Drive for writing group, and then also little mini folders in there for this is my work, this is Kyra's work, this is Holly's work. And there was one called the fresh meat folder. And it is still called that to this day, 6 years later. And that is where if you have something you would like critiqued or something you would like to brainstorm, you put it in there like at least a day before writers group. We're pretty chill about it because we know each other pretty well. So now it could be like, oh, I threw it in, read it in the first 5 minutes. But yeah, so we put the work in and then critique it on Google Hangouts, and it goes really well. And Emma found a link to a video that I have no memory of doing, but I'm confident I'm in, about how we run an online writers group.
I think if I remember right, I think you guys like recorded a writers group session. Yeah.
Thank you. My husband just brought me dinner. So yeah, I have just commented that in the discussion section. I'll put a link to it in the description box as well for anyone who's watching this after live, because I don't know for sure if you get to keep the discussion box. And so yeah, I am a huge, huge fan of the online writers group. We've kind of expanded that now even. We have a Slack account that the Word Nerds are on that we just kind of all do like updates. And if we're doing collab videos, we talk there about it all. And there's a section that once a week we set writing goals with each other and just have that as being a little bit of accountability. Like, hey, did you meet your writing goals last week? What's your new goals for the upcoming week? Well, we haven't actually implemented the did you meet your writing goals yet, because the week I was going to do it, a lot of people had really bad weeks. And I was like, I'm not going to come in on Sunday and ask people if they met their goals. But yeah. So in the critique workshop that I went to, it was run by Olivia Heinbaugh at Write On Con. And it was incredible. So there were a couple things that she talked about that I thought were very worthwhile and wanted to go into as well. She broke down talking about like different things that you should ask yourself and then write down to give as your critique if you're going to be giving an edit letter type of thing with your critique. And so I'm just going to read those off because I thought they were really, really useful. And there's no way I could pretend like I came up with them. It's Olivia Heinbaugh. Follow her. She's great. So ask yourself the questions like, how did the work make you feel? What does it remind you of? What did it make you wonder about? What was confusing? Which parts were slow and which parts were propelling? And those are a really solid set of things to ask yourself if you're not sure what to look for specifically, if you've never maybe done big picture edits before. And then going along with that, some other things that you could be looking for are, could you picture what was going on? Specifically with like the timeline, the setting, and the character, did everything line up? And then getting into the nitty gritty if there is, if they want line edit feedback, which you don't have to give in beta reading. That's definitely not something that is hardcore expected unless it's like a final draft and you guys are close and you really love the person.
and you're like good at grammar. Yeah. Like plenty of writers are not like super great at grammar, so it's not expected that you as a beta reader are either. And can
for
give
sure
line edits.
Mm-hmm.
I would never presume to give someone line edits because I'm like, do I know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Things you can look for and you are totally fine to correct if it's wrong. If there is any spelling or grammar that's obvious, you're fine to be like, hey, this is wrong. If there are any overused words, phrases, or actions, you as a beta reader are going to see that way, way better than the author of the work is going to see it. So one of the things I like to do for that is if it's happening a lot, I'll highlight it on the page. And that's what my beta readers will do for me as well, as they'll just highlight it or put a comment. I think in my last book, I had a character's name that was being said a lot on one page. And at first, her comment was like, this is being said a lot. Here it is again and again. Cough. I think you get the point. I'm not going to comment anymore. And then if there's any like length or formatting problems that you notice as a beta reader, like this is really long. And this is a 150,000 word middle grade. This probably needs to be 3 books. Things like that. Let's see. We had a question. I mentioned Right On Con several times in this chat because I've got it on the brain because it was an online writing conference that was last week that I attended and learned so many things. So I'm trying to bring all of those things to you now. Let's see.
Something else that I usually will think about when I'm kind of doing kind of like a summation of my thoughts at the end of reading the book is I always try to include any like thoughts I have, like how I feel about the characters. And not even just necessarily like, oh, I like them or I don't like them, because like a character can be unlikable, but like, do their motivations make sense? Did they like feel like a real character, or do they feel kind of like underdeveloped? Does their like arc make sense? That sort of thing. So I always try to include some stuff about character and how that works. And then also on the kind of just like more line by line base, another thing that I will point out if I notice is inconsistencies, because I just tend to be like really sensitive to those, so I notice them. Like if a character is like standing by the door and then like suddenly they're like in the middle of the room and it's never been explained or something like that, or like they're holding things in both their hands and then they pick something else up and you're like, but how? I think I read something where she was like holding a baby and holding a lantern and then she like picked up something else and I was like, with what hand?
This is dangerous.
Yeah. I think she like held her toddler by the hand and I was like, how?
She's with the hand with the lantern. Just set that lantern right
fine.
down next to the toddler.
Yeah. Things like that I'll point out if it like really doesn't make sense how something is happening or something like doesn't line up with what you previously said. Because I know as a writer, like I do that. Like I forget what I wrote like 2 paragraphs before and I completely contradict myself. So,
I have to start making folders for myself because I'd like to be like, ooh, I'm going to put this cool foreshadowing point here, and then I completely forget about it. And then like when I'm reading back, I'm like, wait a minute, I was going to do this whole other plot line and I completely forgot about it.
Yeah.
So anytime I ever see a manuscript that has like a little like quirky throwaway thing, I'm like,
was this supposed to
like
be
write that down just in case.
Yeah, so I was curious, what is something that you personally know is always going to get commented on by beta readers for your own work? Something that you like don't look forward to seeing because you thought you fixed it or something. Just like something you know is always going to be your personal writing weakness. I'll go first. What do you think? Because I have a lot of them, but also I wanted to not spring it on you. Yeah, mine is definitely descriptions. I'll get a lot of, so where is this happening? And Erin is the best / worst because every scene she's like, I can't picture this. She does not let me get away with it.
That's a good question. Like definitely kind of what Rachel was just saying, but like dropped subplots and like dropped characters, like a character who's like there and then they don't show up again for another 10 chapters, even though they probably should have appeared at some, like they just conveniently show up. Things like that. Like I already know it's a problem. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely say dropped subplots. And then also not necessarily inconsistent, but like choppy character development. I still have a problem of being like, okay, I need you to get from here to here within a certain time frame. but I don't quite know how to like smoothly do it. So
Yeah.
we like suddenly they're okay with this one thing they weren't okay with, and I'm
Or like, I need you to figure this thing out.
yeah, pretty much. I'm
But
like,
how?
you
Need
don't,
you
you
to
don't,
think
you
through.
don't.
I already know the answer.
Yeah,
so-
but you
Yeah.
can't figure it out too soon. So
Yeah.
I can't give you too many clues. Yeah.
It's definitely the like, oh, sure, they know how to do this now, and I'm like, oh, damn it, I thought that I had integrated it nicely, and apparently I didn't.
Yeah, for sure. Conversely, I was curious what y'all's favorite problems to find are. Like, what's something you're so good at finding and pointing out and helping people fix up. For me, it's probably pacing. I had really good Pitch Wars mentors back in 2016 who really helped me get good at noticing when pacing was off in a story. So that's my favorite. It's like, oh, the pacing is off. I know how to fix this.
I'm really good at language. But I'm also really good at being like, this sounds so boring. Please change it. But for the most part, it's like, this is a description that I've heard 30 billion times. Please, don't be like, wow, please stop. Yeah, like, it was a sunny day and the wind blew through the trees and the creek babbled by, what, and I'm like, okay, I'm so bored. Like, please change this. Or like, they were excited. Oh wow, they said, and I'm like, no, just no.
Yeah.
I'm really
It's
good
like
at
making
being
the
like
descriptions matter.
Yeah, so I would say I am fairly good at switching up language.
Awesome. So there are some, sorry, I'm checking my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. There's a lot of different ways that you can give critique to other people / you can receive critique. We've brushed up on it a little bit. Some of the big things that are typically offered or are options, you don't have to do all of them. You kind of work out between the person you're critiquing for and who is critiquing for you. But there's a thing called an edit letter, which is just like, it's what it sounds like. It's a letter telling you all the big picture things that worked or did not work. This may or may not go along with inline comments. And when I say that, I don't mean line edits. It more means kind of their thoughts as you're reading. So if you're going along and like, this sentence doesn't make sense, they might put a comment, maybe reword, or they might include their questions as they're going through the book. You could also offer for a chance to talk after the fact. Like, hey, here's my critique. Here's my line notes. How about we get on Google Hangouts afterwards and talk about this and see if you have any questions. If you're going to be doing that, I would highly recommend setting ground rules again, figuring out some sort of way for them to have an amount of time to say everything that they would like to say before you get to say anything about the work. That I find, for me personally, that helps me avoid the inclination to defend my work and what I've written. Like, oh, well, no, this makes sense because of this, or, well, this is what I was going for. Because even if you say it nicely and you're not trying to defend it necessarily, sometimes it might make your critique partner soften their critique, which I personally do not want. I don't think it makes for getting better at writing. And then one last thing is the delivery of the critique. You could be very straightforward. Give it to me straight. Please tell me everything. Don't waste my time with compliments. You could be, please be so nice to me. My heart is fragile, but also help me. And then there's what's known as like the sandwich method, which is the compliment, critique, compliment. So what are y'all's personal favorite ways to give and receive critique in that way?
Both giving and receiving. I like to do compliment sandwiches. I like, please tell me that I'm doing something right. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be like, this is the most amazing thing in the world. And, like, I would never ever settle for anything less. And like, but like, just please just be like, yeah, it was cool, or like, I like the concept, or just even something very broad, and then be like, but you got to fix these things. But I think that's potential. I'd be like, cool, that's great, that's a great critique. And then the same thing for when I critique someone's work. I don't want to just be like, this sucks, fix it. Like, and I think Megan likes it when people say that.
I'm not like, very good at like compliment sandwiches. And I think part of it is because like I don't quite like, I want nice things. I definitely want to know like what people like about it, and I like need to know that there's something you liked. But like I don't need it to be like sandwiched nicely or anything. Like, as long as it's in there somewhere, like preferably at the end. But like, I don't know. And I'm giving feedback. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like if things are going well, then I'm not even going to notice, if that makes sense. Like some things will stand out, like, wow, this was a really good line, or like, I really loved this character, or things like that. But for the most part, the things that stick out are the things that aren't good, or the things that like could be better. And so like, I definitely like will point out the things I like, and I make sure to find like some things that I like to point out, because I do know that people need that, and I need it too. But like I don't really do it in a very structured way, I guess, and I really try to just focus on like what needs to be fixed, because I think that's more useful.
Yeah, if it's like an edit letter, or like just a brief kind of overview of something, then I'll be like, okay, I think this needs to be fixed, or like, oh yeah, plot line's good, but like this needs to be fixed. But if it's like line edits, or if it's like chapter edits, I'll definitely kind of like do an MSS and be like, this line is really great, and just kind of like point out those little things, because I'm like, if you're like, why not just be nice and give that person a little boost of confidence, while also being like, please fix this other thing.
I'll give like one nice thing for every like 10 things that need to be fixed. So.
But you know what? That's what keeps me going.
One of the things I'll do for people who like I know need to see a little bit more, because I feel like Emma, I tend to lean towards the side of like, oh well, I'll make a comment if there's something I don't love. But I get that doesn't work for most people. Like most people want some happy feelings, which I also want. And so when I'm going through, I'll do my read through, make all my comments, and then I go back through, because I always like to double check all the comments I've made on a story to make sure that they haven't changed, given that I know the entire plot now. And I will go in after the fact and be like, I like this. This is good. So I don't know if anyone I've ever beta read for has looked back at that and noticed that all of those comments were made on a different day. But it's not that I'm not noticing good things. It's just that I'm like reading so in depth that I'm kind of really focused on, let's find the problems, diagnose them, and then we can work towards fixing them. And then when I do go through it one last time, I can see, oh, this was really clever. I really like this twist and how it plays out at the end.
Yeah, there definitely is room for things to be added later when you're like, oh, I get this now. And I think part of it for me too is that as a writer, like I mean, while I do want my ego stroked, of course, because who doesn't? I also like for the sake of like feedback in your writing, like I want to know what is really good so that I know not to change it. Like I want to know what's really working in the book, what someone like really enjoys and really likes, so that I know to maybe lean into more of that. Like if someone's really enjoying a character or really enjoying a certain like relationship or aspect, like lean into that more. Whereas just being like, I don't know, I don't want to say like meaningless, because it's not meaningless to like give people compliments. But I mostly only want to know if it's something that can like help me once again make the book better, because like maybe I like need more of that thing because it's really good, or whatever.
Like,
or I like shouldn't cut this thing out because it's really good.
Like complimenting for a reason instead of just like complimenting for the sake of complimenting.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I tend to compliment or be like softer when it's somebody that I don't know, because I've critiqued more like manuscript things for friends, but I've critiqued a lot more poetry and short fiction for strangers, hence literary magazine. That sorry, have I mentioned that I'm like a part of a literary magazine? I'm so sorry. Because that's like, I have no idea who these people are, and so that's when I try and do the like, I like this idea, but you probably could change this and this. Where if it's like a friend, I'm like, all right, I read this last week. You didn't change the thing, and I think you need to change the thing. Like, so I'd be a little bit more harsh with people that I do know.
I think it also depends on when you know like how far into their like writing career someone is. Like if you know they're still pretty new and it's like one of their first couple books or something, then you like want to be a little bit softer because you want to encourage them to keep trying and keep learning and keep writing. And like you kind of go into it knowing that it's not going to be like a masterpiece yet because they still have a lot to learn. Versus when like someone like is like multiple books into their career, they're really serious about this, like they know that there are issues for sure, and like and you know the person better. Like I feel like there's some more room to be a little bit more critical.
Yeah. On the other hand, too, I feel like there's more room to be casual in the compliments. Like just reply like, "Oh shit, this is awesome."
Yeah.
I don't have to be like, "I really like what you've done with this character here."
Definitely.
So yeah, let us know in the discussion section what your favorite kind of critique is when you are giving or receiving feedback. And Griswold said, I don't need a love letter, but I do need to hear about what you enjoyed alongside what needs work, which I definitely agree with. I will say too, if you are a type of critiquer who is hoping to find someone who doesn't want as many compliments in the work, something that can be really valuable is pointing out ahead of time. Like if there's a long stretch of book with no comments, that means I'm really enjoying it. Because I do have a couple of beta readers who their style is more like that. And so when I'm reading through it and there's no comments, I can feel like, yes, I did it.
Like no comments are good comments.
Yeah, for sure. We had one more question from Jada R, who also said, I know I've asked a lot of questions. Don't worry about that. Thank you for asking questions. We're so glad you're here. But you asked, did you all come together originally because you write the same kind of work or similar genres? And yes, if you are a little bit newer here, you might not know that we started out as the YA word nerds because we all only wrote YA. Pretty much only YA fantasy, but that was 7 years ago now, and we've all branched out a lot. And so we ended up rebranding to just the word nerds. But we originally all came together because, we all wrote young adult fantasy, and that was the thing.
And I think even though like we write slightly different things in some situations, like Kelly's writing a little bit more adult work, Erin does some middle grade work, we still have like very similar like sensibilities in what we like in books. Because we all came from like the YA background. Like we like fast paced, really good characters. It's not like one of us is like writing like really high literary fiction or something. Except for Rachel and her literary magazine.
Rachel's like, wait a minute, don't say it. No, yeah. And I do think that there's definitely room for having people who don't only love exactly the thing you write. That can be really, really extremely valuable. In feedback and in giving feedback, because you can provide kind of a new perspective on things. But, I'm never going to send a straight up horror book to ask Kelly for initial feedback because she hates horror. I'm not going to make her do that,
I'm never going to send a time travel book to Erin.
And Griswold asked, any suggestions for what to do if your feedback isn't being received, but the writer keeps sending you their work? This is the worst.
Write a very stern email.
Totally fair to like tell someone that like the like beta reading critiquing relationship just isn't working for you anymore. Whether you want to tell them it's because they're not listening to your feedback, or if you just want to say that like you're really busy and you have too many other responsibilities. Because, I'm assuming we are all busy people. Everybody's busy and has a lot of responsibilities. And so like, if you're not getting anything out of it and you feel like they're not really either, then like, it's fair to say like, I just don't have space for this currently.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
And it can suck a lot. I have had a couple of instances where I did like really thorough feedback for someone and felt very confident about it, and then watched them not do any of it.
Mhm.
And it feel very like, but I put in all this work, and if you do this, it will fix it. And you might be right, but you also, there's always a chance that you're wrong and that the suggestions you're making just aren't aligning with their vision or their voice for their characters and plot. And that's fine too. I tend to not read multiple drafts of the same book. And so I don't notice it as much because I'll make the feedback and they either take it or they don't. And then we kind of move on to the next book. And so that's always an option too, is just being like, hey, I feel like I'm too close to it now. I'm happy to see the next book that you write. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Rachel was saying earlier about like, yeah, realizing that like in the end, like it's not, you can't rewrite the book the way you want to write it, if that makes sense. And so like, yeah, they are free to take or not take your recommendations, but you're also free to say like, sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to give you more feedback.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's such a weird line to walk of like, am I wrong? Are they wrong? Is no one wrong? And I'm just not feeling valued enough. And like that's reason enough to not want to continue a working relationship with someone.
Because even if it is whether you're wrong or they're wrong, it's just not a critique relationship that's
Something's
working.
not lining up.
Like
And
your feedback is not working for them for some reason. So
Yeah. A lot of professional relationships, like I know people like don't want to burn bridges or anything, but just it's a professional relationship. Just be like, hey, I don't think that this partnership is right for me. I'm like, that's all you got to say.
Yeah, but please still be my writing pal. Please still be accountability buddies, you know. Whatever you like about working with someone, just lean into that part and don't try and force it into anything else.
I think that also brings up a good point of like whether or not you have to take all of the or like use all of the feedback that a critique partner gives you, because some things you may see and think like, well, that just isn't, that's not the type of book I'm trying to write, you know. But sometimes it may just be that you're feeling defensive, or you're feeling like really precious about your work, which like happens to all of us. And so I think it's really important to, if your instinct is to not take a certain piece of feedback, or if you're not going to take it, to at least evaluate why it is that you aren't going to use that feedback.
For sure, yeah. This is also why it's really good to have multiple beta readers, if that is possible for you, because sometimes you might really disagree with something and you might think it's for good reason. And if it's just one person who's given you feedback, you have no way to kind of judge if you're being reasonable in that feeling. If you have multiple beta readers and both of them or all three of them say this thing isn't working, then you can't be like, oh, well, the three of them just don't get it. It's extremely unlikely that three people will not get your work.
And if you still like really feel like maybe a suggestion someone's making just isn't right for your book, like try to figure out, maybe there's like a root problem that you're missing. Like, why are they suggesting this thing? Maybe it's just that something isn't working, and maybe their suggestion isn't right for you in your book, but there's some other way you can fix it.
Definitely, yeah. Leah mentioned having an odd number can help break ties too, which I love. 3 is my magic number for beta readers. Let's see, we've got one more question. I'm writing and illustrating a graphic novel. Not sure if I should ask a non-graphic novel writer for critique. What do you think?
I think having someone who doesn't write them but reads them can be helpful. Because like, I don't write graphic novels and I definitely can't draw, but I've read a lot of them and like I've taken a class on them. So I feel like I could still give feedback on like story arc, and pacing and things like that. I just wouldn't be able to give feedback on like the specifics of a graphic novel.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Oh, I would say, yeah, the difficult thing about graphic novels is that you need people who are both writers and illustrators to give you feedback on it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that and say that your critique partners or beta readers shouldn't only be non-graphic novelists. But if it is helpful for you to just have someone be like, this didn't work, but they might not necessarily be able to get really into the details of how to make it work, then go for it. And Griswold said, I beta read for a friend who writes plays, and she claims to really value my outsider view. I bet she does. It's not just a claim. It can be really useful.
Yeah. Because like the majority of people who like read graphic novels are not people who write them. So it can definitely be helpful, especially if it's someone who just knows anything about storytelling.
Yeah. I would caution against someone who loves you very much on a personal level being your only beta readers, like your parents or the people you're in a relationship with, unless maybe they are also writers, which is possible. I won't discount that possibility. But if all your beta readers are only people who care about you, I guess even if they are writers, they're probably not going to be able to give you as distance of feedback as you will need. Yeah. Same goes for offering beta reading. Very early on, I made the mistake of offering to beta read for some distant relatives, and it gets real messy real fast because it's really hard to find the line of what's good critique and what is going too far.
Yeah, I did that with a friend where we would meet up almost every week in a coffee shop and write, and I just wanted to shake her sometimes because it was like, like not taking advice, but then also being like, well, what do you think of this one? And I'm like, well, it's okay. It's I see where you're going. Yeah, it's but if I've ever said anything bad about it, she would like break down, and I'm like, come on, man, like you gotta work with me here.
Yeah, it's such a weird line of people who I'm writing friends with. I have a much easier time if we're very close writing friends being like, you're not taking my advice, this is what I said. But if it's someone who is related to me, I can't call them out on, I can't be like, you're not taking my advice, and so your book's not going to be better, you know? Yeah.
And I think it also goes back to like someone who's like in a much different stage of their writing too, you know, like they're like very much a beginner. That can be really hard when they're also someone you're close to, because you know that they need to do more work and learn more and practice more, but it's hard to, but you also like want to encourage them, you know?
Yeah. I feel like it's always, you know, in pretty much any industry where you're putting yourself or your work out there, it's like, oh, you have to have a thick skin. And it's like, I want to give this person a thicker skin, but I probably shouldn't be the one to do it because then they're going to hate me.
You're like, I don't want to burst the dreams of a little baby writer who is also a family member.
Well, I guess, just because you're good at beta reading doesn't mean you'll be good at mentoring. It's a very different thing. And so keep that in mind if you are wanting to help out someone who either you care about and know personally or don't. If they're much, I don't want to say farther back because publishing isn't necessarily as linear as it seems like it is, but someone who is not at the same point that you are. Yeah, inexperienced. Just be careful and know that it's very different. At least until you are at more of a we're writing friends now level, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to like kind of knowing what the person's expectations are too. Like, are they someone who's just like looking for you as a more experienced writer to be like, oh yeah, you're like doing so well. Like, here's some just general things to like learn more about or whatever to think about. Or are they like looking for serious critique?
Definitely. We had a question from N. Griswold. Once you get all your feedback, how long do you wait to dive back into revisions?
I think for me, it depends how much I agree with it.
It depends on how harsh the feedback is.
Well, yeah, because if I'm like, oh, I see, right, like you said that, you know, this character is saying this doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll go and change that right way. But then if you're just like, well, you can't have this whole scene in there. It's not good. I'd be like, yes, I can. And then be like, well,
watch
then,
me.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll like wait like a couple days and be like, fine, okay, and it's all right. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Yeah, sometimes you need more time to process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's different for every book. And it's kind of different for every life stage. I recently went from working part-time to working full-time, and now all of my timelines are much longer because there's just less time. And so now, getting feedback, it's probably going to take me a couple weeks to feel like I have enough mental energy at the end of the workday to dive into it. In the earlier stage, when I was only working part-time, I was probably able and had the time and excitement to dive in pretty much the day I got the feedback. Yeah.
I think sometimes it can be helpful to like wait a little bit, especially if you are kind of having like those immediate reactions of like, oh no, this person's wrong about this thing. Like just like letting yourself sit with it for a little bit can be helpful to kind of so that you're not either being too defensive too quickly or even just being like, okay, I'm going to change all of these things because someone said it's wrong, Obviously it's all garbage.
That's what I lean towards, and it's really a problem because then it's like, oh no, I cut things that were good because I got really eager and just cut it all.
Like, if this person didn't like this sentence, the whole chapter has to go.
Oh no, I am in this picture and I don't like it. Well, we've actually been going for an hour, so I think we're probably going to wrap it up because we have covered a lot. And yeah, so next week we are doing something very new and exciting that I don't think Kelly and I have told any of the other word names about.
Oh no.
So this is new for everyone. But while Kelly and I were doing Right On Con, they had workshops there that were very cool. A lot of like right along with us, do these exercises while we are just in this chat together. And we were both really big fans of that. And so
I just looked at the thumbnail so I know what's coming now.
Yes.
Like, what is she talking about?
We wanted to take some of the best parts of that and start applying it to our own channel. And so next week we're going to be talking about world building, but in the context of a workshop. So we will actually be coming and doing exercises so that hopefully when we're done, you will have a big chunk of your personal world built.
Oh, that's what those templates were for. Okay.
Yeah, I am so
Wonderful.
excited for this. I have a world that needs to be built. So
I need to fix a lot of my world building. So now I'm excited.
I need to build a world hardcore. So I'm very excited.
There's going to be exercises. We're going to be able to hopefully tailor it a little bit more. So, there's always like some people who come and have really, really specific questions that we just don't always have time to dive into, like, well, what's wrong with your character arc? And we're hoping that having these more in detail workshops will make it so that we can really dive in and really help each other and be each other's writing community as much as is possible when, it's the internet and we don't all know each other personally. We had a really good question from Vanessa, which is how can we prep for this chat? I would say bring anything that you have for your current idea or a future idea that you're hoping to write. We are hoping that the exercises will be useful for people who already have their world and are looking to deepen it, as well as people who are starting totally from scratch. And like with our game nights, we're going to figure it out as we go a little bit, adapt based on how next week goes as we move into hopefully doing other things like plot and character. I know a pretty big priority one for us is going to be description writing. We're both really excited about that. So I am really psyched. Yeah, so hopefully you will all be there next week. Just come with something to write with, whether it's your laptop or a notebook, and hopefully it's going to go well.
It sounds really exciting. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yes, I'm super hyped. If you couldn't tell, I checked the thumbnails probably like 15 minutes ago to see what it was going to be and was like, we have to talk about this right now.
It's next week.
Yeah. We have one last question from N. Griswold that I think we will end on. And then if we missed any questions, I apologize. I have the link. Or no, just kidding. No links. Sorry. I lied. I don't know where I was going with that sentence. Anyway, last question. Is there any critique etiquette we should know about?
I definitely think whether you're the critiquer or the critiquee, like being respectful of people's time is important. So, I mean, one time I beta read one of Megan's books and I took like 6 months. Don't do that.
We were younglings then.
My defense, I moved during that time and started a new job, but
and it wasn't a good book.
I wasn't going to be the one to say it, but
it was only my third book I'd ever written, ever.
But definitely try to be like fairly prompt. If you've said you'd give feedback, like try to be pretty prompt about it. But also, like as the writer, like don't like send someone something and be like, I need this in 2 days. Give me feedback. Like always be respectful and like ask people what they have time for, and kind of like have an understanding of kind of what your timeline is, like when you're hoping to get feedback back by, and what their timeline is like with other things on their plate.
Yeah, I tend to personally expect about a month before I reach out and say like, hey, how's it going? Is everything okay? If I haven't heard anything at all after a month, I'll usually be like, you still reading this? But it's not a shock to me if it takes 2 months to get to me.
Sometimes published books take me a while to read, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here today, everyone. It was so great having you. Thank you for all of your questions. Again, come next week. We're going to be doing a Word Nerds workshop on world building. There will be exercises that will hopefully help you develop your own personal world. So yeah, please like and subscribe if you want to be subscribed to our content. And yeah, we will have videos on Tuesday and Thursday and be back next Sunday. Bye.
Bye.